The latest effort to stop a plan to pump and sell East Texas groundwater. A new lawsuit aims to stop what attorneys call the exploitation of groundwater resources in several East Texas counties. This legal filing is the latest attempt to stop a plan to drill water wells in Anderson, Henderson, and Houston counties.
I didn't think that I was signing up for some people to come steal my survivability.
The war over groundwater packed this June meeting of the Natchez and Trinity Valley's Groundwater Conservation District. The district is now being sued by one of the largest poultry producers in the country. Sanderson Farms operates processing plants in Tyler and Palestine and contracts with hundreds of family farms, some of which are included in the lawsuit, all relying on groundwater. The lawsuit focuses in on what it calls a conflict of interest involving a groundwater district board member who was hired by Dallas hedge fund manager Kyle Bass, the man behind the project. Bass hired the member to drill more than 40 high-capacity wells.
We're not trying to pump anything dry and leave. What we're hoping to do is take what recharges, take where there's something that's plentiful and move it to somewhere in the state that is desperate for it.
The lawsuit says the board member resigned before this meeting of the Conservation District last month, citing his intent to stay involved with the projects. The suit also claims another board member was never legally eligible for appointment to the board because he also serves as a Palestine councilman. He has since stepped down from the board. And for these reasons, Sanderson Farms and the others are asking for the drilling applications to be declared invalid. And in a legislative effort to stop the project, State Rep Cody Harris of Palestine is trying to get this issue on the governor's special session agenda.